The morning sky over New Terra was a brilliant shade of purple when the first missile struck. Children were settling into their classrooms, opening books, laughing with friends. Teachers were writing lessons on digital boards. Parents were heading to work, thinking about dinner plans and weekend activities. It was an ordinary morning on an ordinary colony world at the edge of human space. Then the sky turned to fire. The Valorian Empire fleet hung in orbit like predators circling prey. Emperor Thrazcon had given the order himself from his throne world thousands of light years away. The colony had refused imperial taxation. They had dared to say no to the greatest power in the galaxy. They needed to learn respect. They needed to learn fear. Admiral Kresh commanded the bombardment from his flagship. He studied the targeting data on his screens. The buildings below were clearly marked as schools and care centers. His tactical officer mentioned this fact quietly. Kresh waved the concern away. Humans bred quickly, he said. They needed to understand the cost of defiance. He gave the order to fire. 15 schools were destroyed in the first 60 seconds. The orbital strikes were precise and devastating. Buildings collapsed into rubble. Fire consumed everything. The children inside never had time to understand what was happening. One moment they were alive, the next they were gone. 5,731 children died that morning. Their names would be remembered. Their deaths would change everything. Jake Morrison received the distress call while his ship was 3 hours away. He commanded a small human defense frigate called the Valiant. His crew numbered only 40 people. They were supposed to patrol shipping lanes, not fight wars. When the message came through, Jake felt his blood turn to ice. He ordered maximum speed. His engineer warned that the engines might burn out. Jake told her he did not care. They arrived to find the Valorian fleet already gone. The Empire had delivered its message and departed, confident that humanity had learned its lesson. Jake stood on his bridge and looked at the screens showing New Terra below. Smoke rose from dozens of impact sites. Emergency signals flashed across every frequency. He could hear the screaming even through the static. Linda Hayes was the colony director. She had held the position for 6 years and loved New Terra like it was her own child. Now she stood in the ruins of Riverside Elementary School and tried to count the dead. Her hands were covered in dust and blood. Rescue workers dug through rubble with their bare hands, hoping to find survivors. They found very few. Jake brought his ship down to the surface against standard procedure. His crew volunteered immediately to join rescue efforts. They worked alongside colonists, pulling bodies from collapsed buildings. Some were still alive, most were not. Jake found a small girl trapped under a fallen wall. Her name was Amy Chen. She was 8 years old. She held her younger brother's hand. Her brother was dead. Jake pulled her free and carried her to the medical station. She did not cry. She did not speak. She just stared at nothing. The Galactic Council convened within 12 hours. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Grand Chamber on Unity Station. The chamber was designed to inspire awe and cooperation. It was circular, with each species having their own section. At the center was the speaker's platform where matters were debated and decided. Daniel Price represented humanity. He was a career diplomat who had spent 20 years building relationships across the galaxy. He believed in peace and cooperation. He believed that civilization meant solving problems with words instead of weapons. Now he stood on the speaker's platform and felt those beliefs crumbling inside him. The Valorian representative was not present. Instead, Emperor Thrazcon appeared via hologram, his image towering over the assembled council. He was massive by human standards, nearly 3 meters tall with scaled skin and eyes like molten gold. He had ruled the Valorian Empire for 40 years. He expected to rule for 40 more. He showed no concern about the council meeting. Daniel presented the evidence. Images of the destroyed schools, lists of the dead children's names, testimony from survivors. The entire galaxy watched the broadcast. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Even species that disliked humanity felt uncomfortable. Killing children was beyond the normal boundaries of imperial politics. Emperor Thrazcon spoke without emotion. He expressed regret for the loss of life. He explained that the colony had been warned multiple times about the consequences of defying imperial law. He offered financial compensation to the families. He considered the matter concluded. His tone suggested that humanity should be grateful he was offering anything at all. Daniel stood on the platform as the Emperor's hologram flickered and maintained its superior expression. Other council members began to speak, offering diplomatic platitudes about tragic circumstances and the need for both sides to show restraint. They spoke about committee investigations and formal protests. They spoke about everything except justice. Daniel Price was 54 years old. He had 3 children of his own back on Earth. He imagined them in those schools on New Terra. He imagined their names on those lists. He thought about every negotiation he had ever conducted, every compromise he had made in service of peace. He wondered what any of it was worth if the galaxy would watch children die and respond with committees. He raised his hand for silence. The chamber quieted. The Emperor's hologram looked down at him with barely concealed contempt. Daniel met those golden eyes and felt something break inside him. Not his spirit. Something else. His faith in the system. His belief that justice could be achieved through proper channels. He spoke one word. Just one. It echoed across the council chamber and through every broadcast relay in the galaxy. The word was simple and clear. Soon. Then he turned and walked away from the platform. He did not wait for permission to leave. He did not listen to the Emperor's mocking laughter or the confused murmurs of the other representatives. He simply left. Jake Morrison watched the broadcast from New Terra's surface. He stood at what would become the memorial site. Around him, colonists were organizing the names of the dead. They carved each name into temporary markers until proper monuments could be built. 5,731 names. 5,731 futures erased. His crew gathered around him. Nobody spoke. They watched Ambassador Price walk away from the council. They heard the Emperor's laughter. They saw the galaxy do nothing. Amy Chen stood nearby, still holding her dead brother's stuffed animal. She looked up at Jake with empty eyes. Jake felt something change in that moment. It was not rage, though rage was there. It was something colder and more permanent. It was certainty. The certainty that words had failed. The certainty that justice would not come from councils or diplomacy. The certainty that humanity would have to take justice for themselves. He looked at his crew. They looked back at him. In their eyes he saw the same certainty reflected. They understood. They all understood. Soon was not a threat. It was a promise. Across human space, people watched the council broadcast. They saw the dead children. They heard the Emperor's dismissal. They listened to Ambassador Price speak his single word, and they understood soon. The word appeared everywhere within days. Someone spray-painted it on the wall of the Valorian embassy on Earth. It showed up in digital messages across every human colony. Ship captains broadcast it on open frequencies. Soon. Just that one word. No explanations. No manifestos. No declarations of war. Just the promise of something coming, Amy. Rodriguez was a tactical officer on Defense Station Delta, orbiting Earth. She had served in the human Space Navy for 8 years and thought she understood military life. She knew about drills and procedures. She knew about the careful balance of diplomacy and deterrence that kept humanity safe in a galaxy full of older, stronger powers. Then New Terra happened, and everything she knew became irrelevant. The recruitment centers were overwhelmed within a week. Amy watched the reports and felt confused at first. These were not young people looking for adventure or glory. They were engineers with 20 years of experience. Programmers who left high-paying corporate jobs. Teachers who had never considered military service. Her own sister Karen was a pediatric surgeon, one of the best in the system. Karen enlisted in the Naval Medical Corps without even telling Amy first. Amy called her sister and asked why. Karen's answer was simple. She said that someone had to make sure the word soon meant something. Someone had to ensure that when humanity's response came, it would be overwhelming and complete. She said she could not save the children on New Terra, but she could help save the next generation by making sure this never happened again. Then she hung up to attend basic training. On Mars, Dr. Frank Cooper ran the Advanced Weapons Research Facility. Before New Terra, his work was theoretical and slow. The military gave him small budgets and told him to think about future threats. He studied shield technology and propulsion systems. He published papers that other scientists read but never applied. His work was academic, not practical. After New Terra, everything changed. The military gave him unlimited resources and one instruction: find a way to hurt the Valorians badly. Frank stopped sleeping. His team worked in rotating shifts that never ended. They stopped publishing papers. They stopped attending conferences. They just worked. A visiting general came to inspect the facility 3 months after the massacre. He asked Frank what they were building. Frank showed him nothing and explained even less. He simply said they were developing solutions. The general pressed for details. Frank looked at him with eyes that had not seen rest in weeks and said that the Valorians had shields that could stop any conventional weapon humanity possessed. He said humanity would not have conventional weapons much longer. The general stopped asking questions. Emperor Thrazakon received intelligence reports about increased human military activity. His advisors brought him data showing unusual resource allocation in human space. Ship construction had increased by 300%. Military recruitment was at historical highs. Energy consumption patterns suggested major industrial projects. The emperor dismissed the concerns. He reminded his advisors that humanity controlled 89 worlds, while the Valorian Empire spanned 12,000 systems. The human fleet numbered approximately 400 ships. The Imperial Armada had 50,000 vessels. Human technology was centuries behind Valorian capabilities. The Emperor said that humanity's response would be ineffective posturing at best and suicidal assault at worst. Either way, the Empire would crush it easily. But other species in the galaxy began paying attention. The Keltorians were an insectoid race that had existed for 10,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. Their ambassador to the Galactic Council was an old female named Chaka, who had served in diplomatic posts for 60 years. She watched humanity's silence with concern. Chaka requested a private meeting with Emperor Thrazakon. Such meetings were rare and considered a significant honor. The Emperor granted it because he enjoyed reminding other species of his power. They met in a secure communication room where their conversation could not be intercepted. Chaka spoke carefully. She explained that her people had once been dismissed by greater powers. 10,000 years ago, the Keltorians were a young species expanding into space. Older empires considered them primitive and unimportant. Then one of those empires made a mistake. They destroyed a Keltorian colony to demonstrate power. The Keltorians went silent for a year. Then they responded. The empire that attacked them no longer existed. Emperor Thrazakon laughed. He said the Keltorians were a warrior race with millions of years of evolutionary development toward combat. Humans were weak mammals who had only left their homeworld 200 years ago. The comparison was meaningless. Chaka simply said that the Emperor should consider why humanity was so quiet. The Empire expected terrorism or desperate attacks. Instead, there was only silence and that one word. Soon. The Emperor dismissed the Keltorian ambassador. He returned to his palace on Valoria Prime and put the conversation out of his mind. He had festivals to attend and a kingdom to rule. Humanity was a minor problem that would resolve itself shortly. On New Terra, the survivors built their memorial. They cleared rubble from the largest impact site where Riverside Elementary had stood. They brought in stone from the northern mountains. Working together, they carved 5,731 names into the stone. Each name was listed with the child's age. The youngest was 3 years old. The oldest was 17. At the bottom of the memorial, they carved one word in letters 2 meters high. Soon, the word faced toward the sky where the Valorian ships had been. It was a promise and a gravestone combined. Jake Morrison attended the dedication ceremony. He stood in his dress uniform and salted the earth with his tears. Then he returned to his ship and began running combat drills. The drills were unlike anything his crew had experienced. Jake pushed them to their absolute limits. He ran scenarios where they were outnumbered 10-1. He made them practice attacks that seemed suicidal. When his executive officer questioned the training, Jake showed him the tactical data from New Terra. He explained that the Valorians had achieved total surprise because humanity had never believed the Empire would attack civilians so viciously. He said that the next time humanity fought the Valorians, there would be no surprise. There would only be overwhelming force applied with absolute precision. Across human space, similar training occurred on every military vessel. The human fleet was small, but it was becoming sharp. Pilots ran simulations until they could perform attack runs in their sleep. Gunners practiced firing solutions until their accuracy was perfect. Engineers learned to repair battle damage in minutes instead of hours. The entire military transformed from a defensive force into something else, something harder. Amy Rodriguez noticed the change in her station's crew. People who had joked and relaxed between shifts now studied tactical manuals during their off hours. The station's training rooms were always occupied. When she walked the corridors, she heard people talking about weapons efficiency and strike packages. The station felt different. It felt dangerous. She went to visit her sister Karen at the training center. Karen had completed basic training and was now in advanced medical courses. They met in the cafeteria and talked. Amy asked if Karen was sure about her choice. Karen looked at her older sister and said she had never been more certain of anything. She said that the children on New Terra deserved more than committees and compensation. They deserved justice. Amy asked if Karen believed justice would come. Karen smiled and said it would come soon. 6 months passed. The galaxy expected human retaliation. Military analysts predicted strikes against Valorian border stations. Intelligence services watched for human special operations teams. The Galactic Council prepared statements calling for restraint. But nothing happened. Humanity simply went quiet and continued preparing. The Emperor celebrated his 40th year on the throne with a grand festival. Citizens from across the Empire traveled to Valoria Prime for the celebration. There were parades and ceremonies. The Emperor gave speeches about Valorian greatness and eternal glory. He mentioned humanity briefly, dismissing them as a minor irritation that had been properly handled. The crowd cheered. His youngest son, Prince Valen, attended the celebration but felt uneasy. He had studied humanity during his education. He knew they were capable and intelligent. He approached his father privately and suggested that perhaps some gesture of reconciliation might be wise. The Emperor struck his son across the face. He said that empires were built on strength, not apology. He said that if humans wanted reconciliation, they should kneel and beg for it. Prince Valen said nothing more. Dr. Frank Cooper completed his primary weapon system 9 months after New Terra. He called it the Disruptor. It was a device that could collapse Valorian shields through harmonic resonance. It violated 3 interstellar treaties about weapons development. Frank did not care about treaties. He cared about making the Emperor understand consequences. The test occurred on a remote asteroid in the outer system. A captured Valorian shield generator was set up on the asteroid's surface. It was the same model used on Imperial warships. The generator was powered up to full capacity. Frank activated the disruptor from a ship 10,000 kilometers away. The shield collapsed instantly. Then the generator exploded. The entire asteroid. Fleet Admiral Greg Stone stood in the command center deep beneath Geneva and watched screens showing every human military asset in known space. He was 67 years old and should have retired 5 years ago. His wife had died young. His children were grown and scattered across the colonies. The military was his life, and now that life had one final purpose, the screens showed 412 ships. Not many compared to the massive fleets of older empires, but each ship now carried weapons that did not exist a year ago. Each crew had trained to levels of proficiency that bordered on obsessive. Each captain understood their mission with perfect clarity. They would hurt the Valorians so badly that the Empire would never threaten humanity again. Stone had fought in 2 colonial wars during his career. He understood combat and strategy. He knew that wars were won through logistics and planning, not heroic charges. For the past year, he had coordinated the largest military operation in human history. Politicians stayed out of his way. The public did not protest. Everyone understood what was coming. Captain Julie Mason commanded the destroyer Retribution. The ship had been in maintenance when New Terra happened. Now it was refitted with Dr. Cooper's disruptor technology and new weapons that pushed the limits of human engineering. Her crew numbered 230 people. She knew every name. She knew their families. She knew what motivated them. Her executive officer was Lieutenant Ben Parker. He was young for his rank, only 28 years old. He was also brilliant at tactical analysis. During a private meeting in her ready room, he questioned some of the attack plans. The strategies seemed reckless. They required getting close to enemy ships when conventional doctrine said to maintain distance. Julie listened to his concerns. Then she pulled up the casualty list from New Terra on her screen. She scrolled down until she found a name. Marcus Parker, age 7, Ben's nephew. The boy had been visiting family on New Terra when the attack occurred. Ben stared at the name and stopped questioning the tactics. He understood. Distance was safety. But safety meant the Valorians might survive. That was unacceptable. Training continued across the fleet. Ships practiced emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Gunnery crews ran through firing solutions until they could target and destroy enemy vessels in seconds. Marine units rehearsed boarding actions against Valorian ship layouts. Every person in the human military focused on a single goal: operational perfection. Amy Rodriguez completed her promotion to full lieutenant commander. She now served as the Chief Tactical Officer for Defense Station Delta. The position came with access to classified strategic planning. She attended briefings where admirals discussed operations that made her blood run cold. Not because they were evil, but because they were so precisely calculated to inflict maximum damage. One briefing showed the target list. 47 Valorian systems would be hit simultaneously. Not border systems, not military outposts, core systems, wealthy systems, systems where Valorian citizens had lived in peace for generations, believing themselves untouchable. The attacks would destroy military assets and industrial capacity while minimizing civilian casualties. It would prove that humanity could reach any Valorian world, and there was nothing the Empire could do to stop them. The Keltorian ambassador Chaka quietly moved her species' border fleets away from human space. When questioned by the Galactic Council about the redeployment, she said they were conducting routine exercises. The truth was that Keltorian intelligence had been watching humanity's preparations. They recognized the signs. Something terrible was coming, and the Keltorians did not want to be caught in the blast. Other species began noticing the unusual patterns. Trade with human space continued normally, but human merchants were returning home earlier than usual. Human civilians in mixed species stations quietly departed for human territory. Human diplomatic staff in non-essential posts requested transfers back to Earth. It was like watching a tide recede before a tsunami. Emperor Thrazkan ignored the signs. His intelligence services provided reports about human fleet movements, but the numbers did not concern him. 400 ships against 50,000 was not a war. It was a massacre. The Emperor actually looked forward to it. He would crush humanity's fleet, occupy Earth, and demonstrate to the entire galaxy what happened to species that defied the Empire. Prince Valen studied the intelligence reports more carefully. He noticed that human ships were not massing at the border. They were dispersed throughout human space in small groups. It was not a defensive formation. It was not an attack formation either, at least not for conventional assault. He tried to understand the strategy and failed. That failure worried him more than any threat. Dr. Frank Cooper dismantled his research facility on Mars. The disruptor technology was complete and installed on every human warship. His team had developed 7 other weapon systems that violated various interstellar laws. He did not feel guilty. The Valorians had violated the most basic law of all: do not murder children. Everything else was negotiable. On the final day before the facility shut down, one of his junior researchers asked him if he thought humanity was making a mistake. The researcher worried that attacking the Empire would bring more violence, not less. Frank looked at the young woman and asked if she had children. She said no. He said that he had a daughter. She had been a teacher on New Terra. She died in the bombardment trying to protect her students. He said mistakes were made a year ago when the Empire decided human lives were worthless. What came next was consequence. Jake Morrison received his promotion to captain in command of a cruiser named the Defiance. The ship was brand new, built specifically for the coming operation. It was fast and heavily armed. More importantly, it had crew members who had all volunteered for the mission. Every single person on the ship knew what they were sailing into. None of them hesitated. On New Terra, the memorial had become a pilgrimage site. Families from across human space traveled there to see the names. They came with flowers and gifts. They stood in silence and read the inscriptions. Then they left. No one wept anymore. The time for tears had passed. Now there was only cold determination. Amy Chen lived with foster parents in the capital city. She attended school and tried to have a normal life. But she remembered everything. She remembered her brother's hand going limp in hers. She remembered the dust and fire. She remembered Jake Morrison pulling her from the rubble. At night, she looked at the stars and wondered if the people up there understood what they had done. She hoped they would learn soon. The anniversary approached. 1 year since 5,731 children died. The Galactic Council prepared statements about moving forward and learning from tragedy. The Valorian Empire planned nothing. because they considered the matter closed. Humanity prepared in silence. Fleet Admiral Stone gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. They met in the command center, admirals and captains representing every major combat group. Stone was not a man given to speeches. He simply told them the truth. The operation would begin in 72 hours. 47 fleets would strike 47 systems. The Valorian Empire would learn what humanity meant by the word soon. Captain Julie Mason returned to the Retribution after the briefing. Her crew was ready. Her ship was ready. She was ready. That night, she sat in her quarters and wrote letters to the families of every crew member. The letters would only be delivered if the ship was destroyed. She hoped she was wasting her time. She feared she was not. Amy Rodriguez received orders transferring her to the battleship Enterprise as the lead tactical officer for the assault on Valoria Prime. It was the most important target, the most heavily defended, the most dangerous. She packed her belongings and said goodbye to her sister Karen. They hugged without words. Both of them knew what the silence meant. They might not see each other again. Karen's medical unit was assigned to a hospital ship that would follow behind the attack fleets. She would treat the wounded from both sides because that was what doctors did. She hoped there would not be many casualties. She prepared for the worst. The days counted down. Human ships moved into position. Crews ran final checks on systems. Officers reviewed attack plans one last time. Across human space, people watched the news and waited. Everyone knew something was coming. The word soon had been a promise for a year. Now that promise was about to be kept. On Valoria Prime, Emperor Thrazcon attended a dinner party. He laughed with nobles and discussed politics. Someone mentioned the anniversary of the New Terra incident. The Emperor waved it away as ancient history. He said humanity had been quiet for a year, which proved they had learned their place. The nobles agreed and toasted his wisdom. Prince Valen did not attend the party. He stood in his chambers and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were moving. He could feel it in his bones. His father had made a terrible mistake and the Empire would pay for it. He wondered if he would survive to see the aftermath. He wondered if the Empire would survive. 72 hours became 48, then 24, then 12. The human fleets prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel. Coordinates were locked in. Weapons were armed. Crews stood at battle stations. Admiral Stone sat in his command. The human fleets emerged from faster-than-light travel at 47 Valorian systems simultaneously. The timing was perfect. Every ship appeared exactly where planned. For the Valorians, it was as if humanity had materialized from nothing into their most protected space. The impossible had just happened. Captain Julie Mason's destroyer squadron dropped into normal space at Grath 4, a major industrial world that built ships for the Valorian fleet. Her screens immediately showed 30 Valorian warships moving to intercept. The Valorian commander broadcast a demand for surrender. Julie ignored it and gave the order to activate the disruptor. The disruptor fired. It did not look impressive. There was no massive energy beam or explosion, just a pulse of energy that spread across space. The Valorian shields flickered and died. Every single shield on every single ship collapsed at once. The Valorian crews had seconds to understand what had happened before human weapons fired. Julie's squadron targeted the military vessels with precision. Missiles and energy weapons struck ships that suddenly had no protection. The battle lasted 6 minutes. 30 Valorian warships were destroyed or crippled. The human squadron lost no ships. Julie broadcast a message on all frequencies. She said that Grath 4's military capacity was being eliminated. She said that civilian infrastructure would not be harmed if the planet surrendered its military installations. The governor of Grath 4 surrendered within an hour. At Kelmar Station, another human fleet appeared. The station was a massive military shipyard that could build 10 warships simultaneously. Valorian defenders scrambled to respond, but their shields failed, just like at Grath 4. Human bombers made precise strikes against the construction facilities. The shipyard that had taken 50 years to build was destroyed in an afternoon. On Valoria Prime, the largest battle was unfolding. Admiral Stone commanded the assault from his flagship, the battleship Enterprise. Amy Rodriguez sat at the tactical station and coordinated targeting for the entire fleet. They faced over 200 Valorian warships protecting their homeworld. It was the Empire's strongest defensive force. The disruptor fired. 200 shields collapsed. Amy's fingers moved across her controls, designating targets for every ship in the human fleet. The battle plan had been practiced 1,000 times. Now it was real. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, focusing fire on one enemy vessel at a time. The Valorian defenders fought back, but without shields they were vulnerable in ways they had never experienced. Emperor Thrazikon stood at the windows of his palace and watched the orbital battle. Ships exploded like dying stars. Debris rained down through the atmosphere, burning bright trails across the sky. He watched his invincible fleet die in front of him and could not understand how it was happening. The humans were outnumbered. Their technology was inferior. Yet they were winning. His military commanders stood in the palace war room and shouted conflicting orders. The defense grid was failing. Orbital platforms were being systematically destroyed. Human ships were everywhere and could not be stopped. One admiral suggested evacuating the Emperor to a secure location. Thrazikon struck the admiral and ordered him to fight, but there was no fighting left to do. The battle was already lost. Prince Valen watched from a different part of the palace. He saw the truth his father refused to accept. Humanity had not spent the past year preparing for a fair fight. They had prepared to win decisively and overwhelmingly. Every system, every tactic, every weapon was designed to exploit Valorian weaknesses. The Empire had been dissected by a species they thought was primitive. At the Valorian flagship in orbit, a human boarding party prepared to dock. Julie Morrison, Jake's younger sister, led a Marine unit of 60 soldiers. They had trained for this mission specifically. The flagship's shields were down. Its weapons were disabled. The crew was in chaos. Julie's Marines breached the hull and fought their way to the bridge. The Valorian crew surrendered without much resistance. They were sailors, not soldiers, and their ship was dead around them. Julie secured the bridge and accessed the ship's computer systems. She found what she was looking for: the mission logs from 1 year ago. The orders to bombard New Terra. The targeting data showing the schools. Admiral Kresh's voice recordings authorizing the strike. She broadcast everything on open channels. Every species in the galaxy could now see proof that the Valorian Empire had deliberately targeted children. There was no ambiguity. No room for interpretation. The Empire had committed mass murder and called it policy. Julie made sure the galaxy understood what humanity was responding to. Across the 47 systems, human fleets completed their objectives. The pattern was the same everywhere. Arrive without warning. Destroy the shields. Eliminate military assets. Spare civilians. Broadcast the truth about New Terra, then leave. The entire operation took less than 18 hours from start to finish. The Valorian Empire lost over 4,000 warships in a single day. 30 major military installations were destroyed. 8 shipyards were reduced to debris. The industrial capacity of core worlds was crippled. And most devastating of all, the illusion of Valorian invincibility was shattered. Subject species across the Empire watched and understood. The Empire could be beaten. Captain Jake Morrison led his cruiser in the assault on Telmar 3. His mission was to destroy a military academy that trained Valorian officers. The academy was protected by ground-based defenses and a small fleet. Both were eliminated efficiently. Jake watched the academy burn from orbit and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy. Just the cold completion of a necessary task. His tactical officer reported that Admiral Kresh's command ship had been located at a nearby system. Kresh was the commander who had ordered the bombardment of New Terra. Jake received permission to pursue. His cruiser jumped to faster-than-light travel and arrived at the system within an hour. Kresh's ship was trying to flee toward the outer rim. Jake's cruiser was faster. They caught up to the Valorian ship and demanded surrender. There was no response. Jake prepared to fire. Then his communications officer reported something strange. The Valorian ship's crew was fighting among themselves. Internal sensors showed combat throughout the vessel. Minutes later, a message came through. The crew had mutinied. They had executed Admiral Kresh rather than face human justice. They were surrendering. Jake accepted the surrender and took the crew prisoner. He asked the new Valorian captain why they had killed their commander. The Valorian replied that Kresh had destroyed any chance their species had of surviving this war. The crew chose to try for mercy from humanity rather than die for a war criminal's pride. Jake said nothing. He simply transferred the prisoners to a holding ship and continued his mission. Fleet Admiral Stone coordinated all 47 fleets from his command center. Reports flowed in from every system. Success. 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 The casualties were light on the human side. 16 ships damaged, 3 destroyed, 240 human sailors dead. It was a tragedy, but nothing compared to what could have happened. The operation was proceeding better than the most optimistic projections. He opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. Ambassador Daniel Price stood ready at Unity Station. Stone gave him the signal. Price requested an emergency council session. Representatives gathered quickly, summoned by reports of massive combat across Valorian space. When they arrived, Price did not speak. He simply played the recordings Julie Morrison had recovered, the proof of what the Empire had done. The council chamber was silent as the recordings played. Admiral Kresch's voice ordering the targeting of schools. The tactical displays showing children's locations marked as strike priorities. Emperor Thrazkan's authorization of the attack. When the recordings ended, Price stood and spoke one sentence. Humanity has delivered its response. Then he sat down. He did not justify. He did not apologize. He did not ask for understanding. He had said all that needed saying 1 year ago with the word soon. Now that word had meaning. The galaxy had seen what it meant. On Valoria Prime, the human fleet completed its objectives and began to withdraw. The orbital defenses were gone. The fleet was scattered. The planet itself was unharmed, but its ability to project power was destroyed. Admiral Stone broadcast a final message to the surface. He said that Emperor Thrazikan had taught humanity a lesson about power. Now humanity was returning the lesson. Amy Rodriguez monitored the withdrawal from her tactical station. Every human ship was pulling back in good order. The mission was complete. They had struck the heart of the Empire and survived. She thought about her sister Karen on the hospital ship treating wounded from both sides. She thought about all the children on New Terra who would never grow up. The victory felt hollow. Justice had been served, but it could not bring back the dead. Captain Julie Mason's squadron left Grath 4 after accepting the planet's surrender. Her crew was exhausted but unharmed. Her ship had suffered minor damage but remained combat capable. She looked at her crew and saw them processing what they had done. They had killed thousands of Valorian sailors. It was necessary. It still carried weight. The human fleets returned to human space over the following days. There were no celebrations, no victory parades. People understood that what happened was necessary but not glorious. The Valorian Empire fractured over the following weeks. 17 subject species declared independence within the first month. The Empire's military was shattered and could not respond. Nobles on Valoria Prime turned against each other, fighting over the scraps of power that remained. Emperor Thrazkan found himself a prisoner in his own palace, guarded not by loyal soldiers but by nobles who blamed him for the disaster. The Galactic Council met continuously trying to manage the chaos. Ambassador Daniel Price attended every session but rarely spoke. He did not need to. Humanity had made its statement. Other species now argued about how to respond to the collapse of one of the galaxy's great powers. Some called for intervention. Others suggested letting the Empire fall completely. Price simply watched and waited. 3 months after the assault, Emperor Thrazikan requested an audience with humanity. The request came through official diplomatic channels. The Emperor wanted to negotiate terms. He wanted to discuss reparations and peace. He wanted to understand what humanity wanted from him. The request was surprising because the Emperor was essentially powerless. His empire was gone. His authority was broken. But he was still alive, and apparently that bothered him. Ambassador Price discussed the request with Fleet Admiral Stone. They both understood that humanity held all the power in this situation. They could demand anything: territory, resources, the Emperor's execution. Stone asked Price what he thought humanity actually wanted. Price considered the question carefully. He said that vengeance had been served. Justice had been delivered. What remained was ensuring it never happened again. Price traveled to Valoria Prime with an escort of 2 human warships. The planet was different than he remembered from diplomatic visits years ago. The orbital defenses were still destroyed. The shipyards were silent. The proud capital of a great empire now looked vulnerable and afraid. The human ships were small compared to the massive Valorian vessels that used to patrol the system. But everyone knew which species held power now. He was brought to the palace under guard. Not Valorian guards, The nobles who controlled the emperor did not trust their own people anymore. They used mercenaries from other species. Price was led through corridors that had once been filled with art and beauty. Now they were stripped bare. The empire had sold everything of value, trying to pay debts and keep subject species from rebelling. Emperor Thrazakon waited in a small chamber. Not the grand throne room where he had once held court. That room was closed, the throne empty. The emperor sat in a simple chair in a room with bare walls. He looked older than Price remembered. Smaller somehow. The man who had ordered the death of 5,731 children now looked like he was being crushed by the weight of that decision. Price sat across from him. No guards were in the room. No advisors. Just two people having a conversation that would define the future. The emperor spoke first. He asked what humanity wanted. Reparations? Territory? Control of Valorian space? Price shook his head. He said humanity wanted none of those things. The emperor looked confused. He said that victorious powers always demanded something. It was how the galaxy worked. You won wars and you took prizes. Price explained that humanity had already taken what it wanted. The empire's military power was broken. Its ability to threaten others was eliminated. Subject species were free. Justice had been served. Thrazakon asked if humanity wanted him executed. Price said no. He said that humanity wanted the emperor to live. They wanted him to live a very long life. They wanted him to watch his empire continue to crumble. They wanted him to see everything he had built turn to dust. They wanted him to know that it all fell because he chose to murder children to make a political point. The emperor's face showed something Price had not expected to see. Not anger, not defiance, shame, real genuine shame. Thrazakon said that he had acted as emperors always acted, with strength, with decisiveness. He had shown weakness would be punished. That was how empires survived. Price stood to leave. He said that perhaps that was exactly why empires should not survive. Before leaving, Price placed a package on the table. He explained what it contained. Inside was a complete copy of the New Terra Memorial. All 5,731 names, the age of each child, their families, their dreams, their futures that had been erased. The emperor was to read one name per day for the rest of his life. If he refused, human ships would return and finish what they started. Thrazakon looked at the package like it was a venomous creature. He asked why humanity would demand such a thing. Price explained that those children deserved to be remembered. Every single one of them. The emperor would ensure that happened. He would read their names and understand exactly what he had destroyed. Then Price left. On New Terra, a dedication ceremony was held for the permanent memorial. The temporary markers were replaced with eternal stone. The names were carved deep so they would last for generations. Families gathered from across human space. Survivors stood together. Jake Morrison gave a speech to the assembled crowd. He did not celebrate victory. He did not boast about humanity's power. He spoke about the children. He said their names. Not all of them. That would take hours. But he spoke dozens of names and told their stories. Sophie Martin, who loved to draw. Marcus Parker, who wanted to be a scientist. Amy Chen's younger brother David, who collected rocks. He made them real. He made them people, not statistics. Jake said that bringing justice did not bring back the dead. No amount of vengeance could undo what happened. But perhaps those children did not die completely in vain if their deaths taught the galaxy that humanity would not accept injustice quietly. Perhaps their memory would prevent future massacres. Perhaps their names would stand as a warning to any power that thought civilians were acceptable targets. Amy Chen stood in the crowd with the other survivors. She was 9 years old now. Someone asked her if she felt better, now that humanity had won the war. She thought about the question for a long time. Finally, she said she felt nothing but tired. The adults around her nodded. They understood. Victory built on graves tastes like ash. Across human space, the fleets returned home. There were parades, but they were subdued. People came out to honor the returning sailors and soldiers, but there was no wild celebration. Too many had died. The victory was necessary, but not joyful. Fleet Admiral Stone attended several ceremonies and then submitted his retirement. This time it was accepted. He had done what needed doing. Now he wanted rest. Dr. Frank Cooper dismantled his weapons research completely. The disruptor technology was classified at the highest levels. No other species would gain access to it. Frank returned to theoretical physics and teaching. He never spoke publicly about his work during the war. When students asked, he simply said he had done his duty and hoped he would never need to do it again. Captain Julie Mason requested a transfer to a diplomatic vessel. She said she had done enough killing for one lifetime. Her request was approved. She spent the next years helping negotiate peace treaties between species that had been at war. Her experience in combat gave her a unique perspective on conflict resolution. She never forgot what she had done, but she tried to build something better from it. Karen Rodriguez continued working as a naval surgeon. She treated thousands of wounded from both sides during and after the war. She saved lives without asking which species they belonged to. Her sister Amy eventually left the military and became a teacher. The two sisters remained close and tried to process what they had experienced. Some days were easier than others. The Galactic Council formally recognized humanity as a major power. It was not a decision they made happily, but it was reality. Other species offered alliances and trade agreements. Humanity accepted some and rejected others. Ambassador Price gave a speech at the council explaining humanity's position. He said that humans did not seek to build an empire. They had learned from the Valorians what empires cost. On Valoria Prime, Emperor Thruzcon began reading the names. The first name was Sophie Martin, age 6. She had loved drawing pictures of flowers. Her parents had submitted her artwork to the memorial committee. The Emperor looked at a child's drawing of a sunflower and tried to remember why he had ordered her death. He could not remember. It had seemed so simple at the time. Now it seemed incomprehensible. He would read one name per day for the next 15 years until the day he died. Each name was accompanied by information about the child, their hobbies, their dreams, their families. The Emperor came to understand exactly what he had destroyed. Not statistics. Not acceptable losses. Children. 5,731 individual children with their own lives and futures. The Valorian Empire never recovered. It fractured into dozens of smaller states, some democratic, some monarchies, some anarchies. The species that had ruled 12,000 systems for millennia became just another collection of worlds trying to survive. Prince Valen eventually took control of Valoria Prime and established a republic. His father died in the palace, still reading names from the list. The galaxy changed. The fall of the Valorian Empire created power vacuums and opportunities. New alliances formed. Old grievances resurfaced. But no one forgot what happened. When species spoke of humanity, they did so with respect.